Let's keep talk about the my national economic plan for my presidential campaign. Today, let's elaborate the international trade. We already talked about probably last week, and let's use Krugman's and Wells textbook to walk through. And as we already talked, the why international trade exists is each country has its own comparative advantage. And per this book, comparative advantage is driven by three sources: difference in climate. They use the example of production of shrimp in Vietnam and Thailand. The differences in factor endowment. They use the example of the forest products in Canada. United States imports a lot of pulp and paper from Canada. And the differences in technology, they use the cars with a good quality and reasonable price manufactured in Japan, especially 20 years ago. And Japan doesn't have either the climate advantage or the factor endowments advantage, but they mastered superior technology in manufacturing the cars, and that's why United States imported a lot of cars from Japan 20 years ago. And those three sources drive the needs of the international trade because of the comparative advantages. And let's come back to the relationship between the supply demand and international trade. Without international trade, this is the domestic demand and this is the domestic supply, and they intersect at equilibrium, which is also called autarky by some economists. And this area is the consumer surplus, this triangle, and this triangle represents the producer surplus, and which means in this area consumer will gain more benefits, and in this area producer will gain more given the price that consumers pay and the price the producers charge. And in this graph you can tell when the imports is brought in, the price level will drop from here to here, and see the price drops, the demand increase, the supply decrease, and from the quantity perspective, and the imported products or service fill the gap. And the change in supply in surplus, you can tell the consumer will add the surplus x plus z in addition to area W, red triangle W, and the producer will lose x. It used to be this triangle, and now they lose this area. And in this regard, the total change the surplus will be z. So x plus z minus x, z. this represents the imports will increase the surplus. And on the other side, when the export is brought in, the price level will increase to here, right? I should say export is made, not brought in. And the supply, because the price increase, the supply will be an increase here, but demand dropped. The gap is filled by these exports, right? And in this regard, the suppliers gain more surplus, and the net change of the surplus will be this triangle Z. So as we can tell, both imports and exports increase the surplus, which may be the good thing, right? But a lot of countries implement the trade protection in the form of the tariff. So without the international trade, the other key is here, and with the international trade, without any protection, the price line will drop to here. But when the tariff is imposed, which means the cost of the imported products or service will increase, and the price line will get back in, here in between the other key and the price line without the protection. So the import will be shrunk if you compare to the total import without the protection. And this is probably good for the countries implement that protection, but it will hurt the country without the protection. From this graph, probably you can tell, and this is the loss of the consumer surplus, A plus B plus C plus D. And the producer will gain the surplus area of area A, and the government will collect the tax, right, the tariff, and will gain C, and the net loss of the total surplus will be B plus D. So the protection actually shrink the surplus. There are always arguments about the protection, whether it's good or not, but the general trend over the world is to eliminate the protection. But as I already said, not everyone is on the same page, right? And globalization means more international trade and more free trade. But there are challenges to the globalization. For example, one argument or challenge is inequality. For example, let's use the United States as the example, because we generally export the products or the service which produced, manufactured, or provided by the highly skilled workers. And this group of people already earn a lot, higher than average income. And if the exports of those products or service increase the total productions, and this group of people will make even more money, right? On the flip side, we generally import the lower tech products, which manufactured, produced, or provided by the low skill workers from foreign country, and that will reduce the opportunities domestically in the United States. That will hurt the income brought into their families by the low-skilled workers. And from this perspective, you can tell the inequality between the highly skilled workers and the lower skilled workers will be enlarged, right? The gap will be even larger. So globalization may cause the inequality even worse. Anyway, so in this scenario, international trade, you cannot say it's good or bad. It's always like a gray area. But my conclusion after walking through, this chapter for my national economic plan is, in general, we should push other countries to eliminate their production, to open their markets. But before everyone gets on the same page, we should tighten our import control to protect our people and our industries.